Hey, greetings everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So I'm excited today because I want to talk about the no hangs protocol that probably a lot of you have heard about, and the work of Dr. Keith Baar. It was about 4 years ago at this point that Abrahamsson published his first video on the no hangs protocol, and since that time he's published others. Other climbers have published videos showing their results, and Dr. Keith Baar, whose work the no hangs are based upon, he's been, there have been conference presentations, papers published, and many interviews with Dr. Baar from people in different aspects of the health and fitness industries. This matters to me personally, not just as a coach, but also as someone who has a long history of tendon issues in my climbing. And in fact, I would say that for the past 10 years, I have really not been able to have a good climbing season because I keep getting interrupted by tendon problems. And basically, the way a typical season goes for me is that I get excited, I start climbing more, my volume and intensity climbing increases, and then I have so much pain. Either I get an acute injury like a tendon strain or a pulley strain, or I just get so much pain in my elbows that I really have to back off. I get frustrated and I stop climbing altogether. And it's embarrassing to admit this, but this is a pattern that has been repeated many times for me. So this year I decided that I was going to try the no hangs protocol for the reason that Dr. Baar has very good academic credentials. He's not trying to sell anybody anything. And then also the price of entry on using his protocols is so low. It strikes me that, if you're doing what he tells us to do, the likelihood of getting injured or aggravating an injury seems very low. Maybe not zero, but definitely very low. So I started doing no hangs of December of last year, so I'm basically like 3 months in now, but I did get a little bit of a false start due to illness. So I've been doing no hangs and another procedure consistently for 2 months now. And like many other people, my results have been very good. I saw very dramatic and very rapid increases in my finger strength. But what I want to talk about today actually are some other things that I noticed that aren't directly related to finger strength. One of the ailments that I've been dealing with for the past number of years is a chronic, intense pain in my left shoulder, specifically in the medial aspect, in the medial deltoid on the left side. And this was not something that I was expecting no hangs to address. I wasn't even thinking about my shoulder pain when I started the no hangs. I was just thinking about, maybe I could use no hangs to toughen up my fingers so that I wouldn't get finger injuries as frequently. But what I noticed is that about 10 days in to the no hangs, between 10 and 15 days, my shoulder pain went away. And, for me, the question was, well, wait, why is this impacting shoulder pain? So that's when I realized that I was doing my no hangs slightly differently than what others have prescribed. That is, rather than doing like a dead hang off the board and just applying a little bit of force to the ground with my feet, I'm always using my scale, because I wanted to make sure that my load wasn't increasing as my fingers got stronger, that I was being true to Dr. Baar's loading protocol, and he does emphasize that the load doesn't need to increase as you're doing this. So I wanted to keep my load the same all the way through. So what I'm doing is I'm standing on the scale with my feet flat on the scale and my knees straight. And instead of doing a dead hang off the holds on the board, I'm actually applying a little bit of pressure and ever so slightly pulling myself up off the scale. And the load I've been using has been between 30 and 37 pounds. So I'm doing, like, if you could imagine doing like a 30-pound pull-up, you know, where you're only lifting 30 pounds of your full body weight, that's what I've been doing. And I realized that that is different. And again, this is totally accidental. I didn't intend to do this. It's just sort of the way it happened. But what happens when you're doing that is you're running tension throughout a closed kinetic chain that involves the lower arm, the upper arm, the shoulders, the back, maybe even the neck as well. You're running that 30 pounds or 37 pounds all the way through that system. And what I noticed is this looks like a corollary to another activity that Dr. Baar suggests, a static push-up position. There's a certain relationship here. The static push-up position, for example, at the elbows, that's a position of static elbow extension. The no-hangs that I'm doing is a position of static elbow flexion. So it's just working the opposite side of the joint. But it looks like the same principle is involved. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And, you know, obviously, my theory is that this looks a lot like his other description of activities to help the shoulders. Of course, that's just a theory. This would need to be tested, but I would hope that this is the kind of thing that people would notice and test in a more rigorous environment. Now, the other thing I was interested in, or am interested in, is tendinopathies at the medial and lateral epicondyle. It seems to me that because the no-hangs engage the flexor digitorum superficialis, that no-hang should be a good treatment for tendinopathy at the medial epicondyle. But what I'm also curious about is, what about lateral epicondyle issues? And because I've had issues on both sides, left and right, at the lateral epicondyle for years, and it's been really, really bad, and that's been one of the main things that has hindered my climbing. So what I decided was I would just take Dr. Baar's loading prescriptions, you know, because they're so specific, and apply them to an exercise specifically for the lateral epicondyle. So what my idea was to brace the forearm on a weight bench, to keep the wrist in a neutral position, and to apply a very low load, just so that I felt a little force moving through the tissue, but not pain or strain, and that I would hold this statically, right, because that's part of Dr. Baar's prescription, that there's not movement, that I would hold it for 30 seconds to overcome the stress shielding, and then rest for 2 minutes, and then load for 30 seconds, rest for 2 minutes, and load for 30 seconds. And what I found was the pain reduction was rapid and dramatic. I went from a pain level of about a 7, maybe an 8, to less than 1 in about 10 to 14 days. Now, I'm 2 months in. The pain isn't gone completely. And in fact, I wouldn't necessarily call it pain. It's pain or discomfort. I go through a lot of the day with no pain or discomfort at all, but it's still not gone completely. So this is something that I need to continue to work on, to see if I can get the pain level down to 0. Because basically, with everything that I'm doing, I do have a specific success criteria in mind. I want my pain levels to go to 0, no injuries to interrupt my season, so that I want to have a really good spring and fall climbing season where I'm increasing the intensity of my climbing. I'm setting on-site and red point goals. That's, for me, the success criteria for using these activities. And I'm going to continue to use the no-hangs and the exercise I just showed you for the lateral epicondyle throughout the year. I am cautiously very excited about no hangs specifically and Dr. Baar's work in general. It seems to me that from what I've experienced, what other people have experienced, that these could be therapeutic modes that really, really benefit climbers. Now, that being said, there's obviously a need for a lot more understanding and a lot more research. And I think as Dr. Baar and his students do more research specifically for climbers, the description of how this works and why it works and how we should do it are going to change. That would only be natural. Or maybe I shouldn't say change, maybe I should say they will evolve. But what I'm seeing so far is potentially something that is very easy to do, that can dramatically increase tendon health and tendon strength, which should mean that climbers can potentially have much longer periods of development without interruption from injury. And man, I mean, isn't that great? And to think that, people who have had chronic tendon pain, like me, could get to a point years into their climbing career where they're pain-free, that's also very exciting. So anyway, that's what I've got for you today. If you've tried no hangs yourself or other things based on Dr. Baar's work, please, share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Anyway, that's it for today. Climb hard, have fun, and we'll see you next time.